Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing? We're back. Another episode of WNBA Social, part of the Hoop Social Media Network. I'm your host, Shaun Holko, and joining me is a friend who you guys have heard and seen before, and this is my first recurring guest here on WNBA Social. And joining me is none other than Sam Poeppelman. How you doing, Sam?
Not too bad. Excited to be back.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. And you were with me on the inaugural episode of WNBA Social, and that we recorded back, and I think it was back in May, and we previewed the WNBA season. Such an exciting season that we were getting into, as the Liberty and the Aces, obviously back then, were the favorites as the two super teams. You decided to go away from the norm of most people like myself being basic, picking the favorites, as everyone needs to tune in on I was going to say Twitter, on X and on YouTube, because you could just see me smack my mic on accident. So I apologize if there was any audio issues there, but that's why you got to tune in on YouTube and X, so then you can see awkward moments like that. But anyways, when I had you on back in May, as we previewed the season, I went with the basic pick of Aces and Liberty in the finals. I did pick the Liberty to win, which wasn't necessarily the popular pick back in May. But remind me, what was your official pick? Was it the Sun in the final? What was it?
So I think I chose the Sun. I forget who I had them playing. But yeah, I think I
like Sun and Wings or something maybe, like that.
Yeah. So, but neither of them made it. So they got so close, though.
But just like I've talked about throughout this season, like, you have the top two teams, and you can basically put them in a tier by themselves. For half of the season, it looked like Vegas was in a tier by themselves, and then the Liberty were in the second tier, and then you had the next suitors in the third tier. Now it's obviously the top tier. And so what I've been saying all season is, like, the teams that finish 3 and 4, being the Connecticut Sun and the Dallas Wings, that's almost like finishing 1 and 2, considering the disparity.
In any previous season, they might have, maybe barring last season, but in any previous season, they would have been the 1 and 2. So it's kind of crazy. We're in a new level of WNBA play.
Most definitely. And I absolutely love to see it. I'm trying to get more and more people to just give the league a chance, because that's part of the whole point of this podcast. Is I have friends and family who know how I really got into the WNBA back in 2020, and I've been a big advocate for it since. And I've seen the improvement gradually just in the last 3 years, but specifically over the last 20 years. And the narratives that are out there are honestly just bullshit. And so all I just ask is for people to just give it a chance. And now you'll be able to watch the best of the best in the WNBA Finals coming up starting on Sunday. And I was so frustrated when the Commissioner's Cup happened and it was on Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
I had to make an effort to get an Amazon Prime account. But now everyone can tune in on ESPN. And so just what message would you have for the skeptics of the WNBA going into these finals?
I think it's just a really exciting product. And if you're going to watch, like, the final is a great series to watch, or even just to tune into a game, right? Because this is literally the best teams in the league going head to head. So it's, some of the best basketball you're going to get. And what else do you have to do besides watch this WNBA Finals? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, right. I've seen a lot of people argue, like, oh, these prominent WNBA games shouldn't be on Sundays at the same time as football and everything. But it's like, you could be like me, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people. Like, I see all the setups that people have every Sunday to watch football. You have one main game on, then you got the red zone on another TV. You got this on a laptop. I've been having the WNBA on my main TV, and then on my smaller TV, which was my original TV for like 9 months, the first 9 months of living on my own. But then I got a donation, because the best nation in the world is donation. And my brother gave me his old TV. And so now I have the capability to do things like that. And even if you have the WNBA game on mute, like, put it on, you'll see it out of the corner of your eye. Up there goes Marine Johannes just throwing an insane pass. Up back on the other end, Chelsea Gray's doing the exact same thing. It's just the level of play is so high, and we're going to get into the WNBA Finals later on today's episode of WNBA Social, episode number 5. But we have some big news to get to first. For years, we've been talking about will they or won't they? Will the WNBA expand? And it's no longer being teased. It is officially a thing as expansion is happening. The Bay Area is going to be getting the 13th team, and the 14th team is to be announced. First of all, Sam, I want to start off just on the Sacramento note of it, because, I mean, we're both Sacramento natives. We both grew up with the Monarchs. And this news of the WNBA expanding to the Bay Area, for some people, has been seen as a death nail for the Monarchs franchise ever coming back, or at least anytime soon. And so just from the Monarchs perspective, what did you think of this news of the Bay Area getting an expansion team?
I mean, I think you just said it. Like, it's a little bit of like a bummer, right? Because I think looking at the WNBA right now, they want to expand into new markets. And so, you know, they kind of probably consider Northern California one market. But you know, it is also close professional basketball, right? So on that side of the token, like, you know, it's exciting. It's cool. Hopefully they can, you know, bring back championship to Northern California for the WNBA. That'd be awesome.
I would agree. And I, for one, am thrilled about this news, not only because the league is growing, but also I won't have to get on a flight anymore just to go see a WNBA game, because kind of what sparked my love for the league. And it all started in 2020 when we were all just sheltered in our homes, and I was watching the Wubble, and I was watching the men at Disney World. And I really enjoyed that time. But what really piqued my interest in the league is my friend Matthew and I, who I had on episode 3 of WNBA Social. So you should all go back and check that out. But anyways, Matthew and I, we've now done trips to go see WNBA games over the last 3 years. We went to Seattle in 2021 because we had to see Birdie before she retired. We didn't know if she was going to officially retire back in 2021. And so we went to Seattle, but they were still working on the renovations of Climate Pledge Arena. And so then we had to go up and take a train to Everett, Washington, to the Angel of the Wind Arena, or whatever they call it. It's like a casino that they have up there. And that's where the Storm were playing that season. And so we went to a game there, and it was very exciting. And then the following year, we went back to go see Birdie's official final year and got to see Climate Pledge Arena and everything. And so Matthew and I have planned various trips to go see the WNBA. And obviously we do more than go to the WNBA games when we're traveling, but that's been the main purpose of the trip and what's getting us there. And so this year we went down to LA and we saw a couple of games between the Sparks and the Liberty back at the beginning of August. And so anyways, just selfishly for Matthew and I'm happy that I won't have to get on a plane anymore just to go see a game, because I'm trying to see as many as I possibly can.
It makes it more accessible, right? You could theoretically be a season ticket holder, right? Like, that's how easy it would be to get to games and stuff. So, and that has been lacking for the last, 14 years in Northern California. So, yeah.
Exactly. And I think you just made a great point there, because you mentioned season ticket holders. I, for one, wasn't a season ticket holder for the Monarchs. I mean, I was 11 years old when the team disbanded. And so I tend to lean on other people who were or attended a lot of games. And I want to give a shout out to Damian Barling of D-Lo and KC on ESPN 1320, the radio station here in Sacramento, because Damian is a big fan of the WNBA for many reasons. And he attended a lot of Monarchs games back in the day. And something that I heard him say recently on his show is that a lot of Monarchs season ticket holders came from the Bay Area. Yep. And so now all of those people who have been without a team in Northern California for over a decade, they get a team right in their city or close to them. If they're in Oakland, they could go to San Francisco for the actual games. And the news about this is that this is going to be probably the Golden State whoever's, because they will practice and have their facility in Oakland, but then they will play their games at the Chase Center in San Francisco. And so I'm happy for all the people in San Francisco. But to follow up on a point that you made earlier, I don't necessarily want this to be Northern California's team, just because I am still holding out hope that the Monarchs will eventually come back. Do you think that it's realistic to say that the Monarchs will come back someday? Because I do. Because you look at the MNBA, they're at 30 teams. The WNBA obviously has a long way to go. They're at 12. Now they're on to 14. But I think that the Monarchs could come back when they have 20 teams or 24 teams. It's just not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you look at the MNBA as a model, right? Like, I mean, they have teams in the same city, right? There's 2 teams in LA, right? Like that's not a big deal.
Basically the same for New York.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's lots of cities that they've got multiple teams, so it totally makes sense, I think. And to have the history there, right? You have a championship winning team, to also, I think, have a really good basketball community too, is really strong. So yeah, no, totally. I would, man, that was like the worst day ever when I heard that the Monarchs folded. So I would, man, love to have them come back, and I think we could see it in the future. I just think, the WNBA is being very strategic in their expanding. And that's actually, I'm curious, I haven't read all the details. I don't know if you know this, Shaun. So there was actually 2 bids in for the Bay Area. There's 2 separate bids. There was an Oakland bid and a San Francisco bid. The Oakland bid was being pushed by Alana Beard, former WNBA player. And so I kind of think they might have, like I said, I haven't read into the details, but it sounds like they've like combined the 2 bids, because the Oakland bid was going to be to use the Oakland Coliseum. And then
Oakland Arena,
or Oakland Arena, sorry. And then the San Francisco bid was always through the Warriors ownership group. So it kind of seems like they've combined the 2 bids, which is exciting, because when I heard that there was 2 Bay Area bids, I was like, man, that's tough, because right, they're not going to do one in Oakland and one in San Francisco right now. Maybe in the future that'd be super cool, but right now. So I'm curious to read into the details a little bit more.
That's pretty interesting. I actually didn't even see those reports myself, but I mean, it definitely seems like the smartest decision, because I mean, you already have the Golden State Warriors who moved from Oakland to San Francisco, and they've always been California's team, but more specifically the Bay Area's team. And so it makes sense to do the same with the WNBA. And just, I really like how some people are like, what's the point of having them centered in Oakland, but then play their games in San Francisco? Number one, it's because why would you play in a 50-year-old arena when you could play in a brand new arena? I'm not the biggest fan of the Chase Center, but it's still a brand new arena right on the water. And so it makes sense just because they are the Bay Area's team. And just to follow up on the point about the Monarchs, I definitely think that the people who think that this news of the Bay Area getting an expansion team is the death of the Monarchs officially, I disagree. I think if you are thinking very short term and you are very impatient, it's probably unrealistic that Sacramento is going to get a WNBA team now, probably in the next 10 years. But after that, I'm more optimistic. 10 to 20 years or 10 to 25 years, I'm more optimistic of that. And just like I said earlier, just as the league continues to expand, hopefully they bring the Monarchs back to Sacramento, because I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but when they announced the news with a formal press conference and everything hosted by Malika Andrews, who's from the Bay Area, which I thought was pretty cool. At the very end, there was a reporter who asked Kathy directly about Sacramento, saying, the Monarchs used to be around. Oh, they were a championship team. Is there any chance that Sacramento could get a team? And man, Kathy did her best job of dancing and skipping around that question, because, and I give her credit, and she has great media training, because she started out the response by saying, the great thing about expanding is that everyone wants to get a WNBA team, and Sacramento is certainly one of those markets. And then she immediately transitioned to naming off like another 5 cities. The first city that she named in that whole soliloquy, I don't know if that's the right word, whatever, we're going to keep it pushing. The first name that she mentioned was Portland. And why I found that to be significant is because Howard Megdal of the Next Hoops, and he's one of the best women's basketball reporters out there, he reported yesterday that Portland is currently the front runner to land the 14th team. I find that to be very strange because of exactly what you said earlier, where it seemed like the W was trying to go to new markets.
Yep.
But yet Portland very briefly had a team from 2000 to 2002. So they aren't a brand new market, and they obviously failed very quickly versus the Monarchs basically were a victim of circumstance where their pre-existing owners just wanted nothing to do with basketball anymore, and they couldn't find someone to take on the reins of the team within 2 weeks before they just disbanded the team. And so anyways, all of that said, what are your thoughts on the potential of Portland being the 14th team in the WNBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. Portland's a really cool women's sports city in general, having had a previous WNBA team, having one of the most successful women's professional soccer teams in the NWSL. So I think it's really exciting. Now, to what you just said, though, of like new markets and the point that I made earlier, it doesn't quite make sense, but I have a theory on this. I actually think Toronto is supposed to be the 14th area. So a while back, I think it was last year, right? They had announced whatever the like 8 cities that had put in bids or whatever. And then I think at one point they announced like the narrowed down four bids that were, in their words, you know, finalists basically, that they were focusing on. And Toronto was one of those. I think it was Toronto, Philly, Portland, and the Bay Area, maybe.
Sounds about right.
It was in that range. And right, they did a game in Toronto in this season, sold out game, first time ever been played in Canada. And then I read some reports yesterday that I guess they were having issues with getting an arena to commit in Toronto because they don't want to give up scheduled time that they already have for other, you know, concerts or whatever. So it's kind of a bummer. I was like, dang. Because that'd be a totally new market, totally new, you know, avenue, a market that really wants, you know, the WNBA to be there. So anyway, just I think that maybe then Portland is their backup option. I don't know. We'll see. Or they just have a really, you know, exciting ownership group too. That's the other thing. That's the bummer with Sacramento. Nobody's put in a bid, right? Like we're not going to get a team unless somebody steps up with the bid and the resources to be able to make it happen. So that's what we got to do, Shaun. You and I in 10 years, pool our money.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, Vivek Ranadive, for the time being, until Sam and I get our money up, Vivek Ranadive, I am looking at you directly because you got the resources, you got the arena. I don't know if he said it verbatim, but somebody said when he took over that the Monarchs would be back one day.
Yep.
Here we are, almost 10 years later, still not back. And to follow up on the Portland point, I also saw, and this is probably along the same lines of the article that you read, with Toronto having issues finding an arena to commit. But I saw that the Toronto bid was like completely pulled. Like the guys who were in charge of that group just pulled it. They just pulled their bid because they just said, okay, it's not the time and not the place. And so that probably was a big loss for the WNBA and what they were anticipating.
Right.
And so I agree with you that Portland definitely seems like a backup. I got to speak again for my friend Matthew because he is a huge Philly fan all around. Even though he supports Sacramento and all the Sacramento teams, but he is a big Philly fan. And so as a WNBA fan and also a Philly fan, he just is dumbfounded by this news about Portland because he's like, why wouldn't you go to Philly?
Right.
It's a brand new untapped market.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's also a miss. I mean, and I think from what I read, they had a pretty powerful ownership group. I think like Don Staley was part of that bid as well, which like, I mean, come on, right? It's Don Staley. That I think that's a miss totally. Totally untapped. And yeah, like we're not market analysts for the WNBA. I wish we were, but I think that would be a better opportunity than Portland.
I agree, but the playing devil's advocate, because I was talking back and forth with Matthew about this yesterday, and I think the reason why they would prefer Portland over Philadelphia is because, number one, you look at the map of WNBA teams. There are plenty of teams on the East Coast already, where the West Coast needs some love. I mean, I think off the top of my head, got 4 teams. You got Vegas, Seattle, LA, and Phoenix on the West Coast, actually considered the West Coast. And most people don't even consider Arizona as the West Coast.
Right.
And so but I mean, I'll at least group them in. And so you have 12 teams already, and 8 of them are away from the West Coast. And the West Coast is only one side, but to me, it seems like they're trying to balance it out a little bit more, which is why I'd say initially just with this 14th, 13th, and 14th team that they're trying to target the West Coast more. I mean, I appreciate it because, like I said, I won't have to hop on a plane anymore, and I can just drive to a game now in the Bay Area. But the other thing I would argue in favor of Portland, and you touched on it, just with the great fan base that they have for women's sports in Oregon, but specifically in Portland, is that, I mean, I'm wearing my Stanford shirt, and we've talked in the past about how I became a fan of Sabrina Ionescu because I watched her cook my Cardinal constantly, every single time. And Sabrina and just that entire Oregon Ducks women's basketball program, they are the ones who really like ignited that love for basketball, but specifically women's basketball in Oregon, because obviously they have the Portland Trailblazers, and Damian Lillard and Brandon Roy have had their own impact on basketball in that state. But women's basketball definitely has a huge fan base, and that's probably what they're trying to touch on. Yeah, no, totally. I think between that and the NWSL, I think you've got a really good women's sports kind of foundation, which I think has really been a key recipe for success for the WNBA. So I think it fits totally. You know, it's also right. It's for you another close one to go to instead of getting on a plane for 4 or 5 hours to head east. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it also makes sense probably from, you know, a travel perspective, right? Like you were just saying, right? Location wise, it makes a lot of sense logistically, and I think it's a good spot. Definitely not a bad place for a WNBA team, but probably not where I would have picked from that list of bids. Would not have been one of my top ones. I was even more intrigued by Denver being a potential location. And when I saw the Portland news coming from Howard in the Next Hoops, I just thought to myself, I was like, well, the Pacific, and I don't want to group a bunch of states together, but we kind of do. The Pacific Northwest already has their team. And we talked about how with the Monarchs, they had a bunch of fans in the Bay Area. Well, I'm sure that there are plenty of fans in Oregon who have been fans of the Seattle Storm for a very long time. And I saw when I've been to probably about 5 Storm games, I think, collectively in Seattle now. And every time I go and they're playing the Liberty, you always see Oregon jerseys and Sabrina jerseys everywhere. Not even so much Liberty jerseys, but you see Oregon Sabrina jerseys. And so that's definitely a great market. We'll see. I mean, I'm not trying to nitpick too much because I'm just trying to be optimistic that they're just going to keep expanding and expanding. And they're just going with who is most ready right now. And like you said, as someone who currently lives on the West Coast, I'm not opposed to adding more teams on the West Coast. Did you have any final thoughts on expansion before we move on to award winners? I hope it happens faster than your predicted 10 to 20 years, man. I mean, can't wait another. It's been 15 years since the last time the WNBA expanded. Like, that cannot be the pace that this league expands, or else, you know, we're never gonna get enough teams. You know, it just is. It's been slow, and I don't know if there's been logistical stuff. I don't, you know, I like Kathy as the commissioner. I think she's been awesome. But, you know, I think there's really this excitement around women's basketball right now, and it can't go untapped. So, like, yes, we're expanding, but a lot of people view these 2 expansions as too late. So, you know, like, we need to be on the 15th and the 16th team pretty quick here. We can't sit at 14 teams for another 15 years. So that's my last note on expansion. 2028. Let's say 2028. Yeah. Hopefully the news doesn't take that long to get announced for the next group of expansion teams. But here we are in 2023, and they just announced 2 teams that'll start in 2025.
Maybe in 2026, after they see like a first full year of the expansion teams, how they want more.
Maybe by 2026, we get another announcement about more teams coming in 2028. That's what I would like to see, but we shall see. And regardless, I'm going to continue to support the league and its growth.
Oh, yeah.
So here we are on episode number 5 of WNBA Social. Shaun Holko alongside Sam Poeppelman. And so now moving on, Sam, before we get to our 2023 finals preview, there were some awards that were won. I'll let you choose. Do you want to go from most significant to least or least to most?
Let's go least to most. And this is your ranking of least to most significant.
Yeah, and I yes, that is correct. But the way that I'm ranking these is, to me, this is a players' league. So we can talk about the executive and the coach first.
Yeah,
then we'll get into the more prominent awards. And so starting off, not to say that this is insignificant, but among all the awards, it is, unfortunately. But Jonathan Cobb, the general manager of the New York Liberty, he won WNBA Executive of the Year. And I have absolutely loved seeing this turnaround led by Cobb of this team, and how he came in, I think, in 2020 or 2019. And so he has been here for the entire rebuild. That's why I was so excited to see Sabrina and Benaja advance to the WNBA Finals, because they've been on this team through the grind, especially that 2020 season when Sabrina got injured and hurt her ankle 3 games into that season. And so what do you think about Jonathan Cobb winning the Executive of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, well-deserved. The moves that he made in the offseason and free agency, like, come on, that's why we're here with the Liberty. So totally well-deserved. And I'm sure he's got, a lot more coming up here with all the wonderful draft picks we're going to have. So yeah, I think definitely well-deserved.
Most definitely. I mean, you bring in 2 former MVPs and a Hall of Famer. I mean, not to say that the 2 MVPs aren't going to be Hall of Famers in their own right, but 2 former MVPs and a Hall of Famer in Courtney Vandersloot
of their careers.
Right, exactly. And not only that, but one of those former MVPs won MVP, the first ever in New York Liberty history. We'll get to that. That's last. I will say that's probably the most significant. But to bring in a former MVP, have her win the MVP award again in her first season with the new team, it has a lot to do with the team that he built collectively. And it's not just the super team and the former MVPs being Jonquel and Brianna, and then obviously Courtney Vandersloot, Sabrina Ionescu. Shout out to Benaja Laney. I'm going to talk a lot more about her in our finals preview, because to me, she is the key to this team winning it all. And then even you look at bringing in Maureen Johannes a couple years ago.
I was going to say the bench for the Liberty. That's going to be my key in our finals preview. But yeah, it's stacked, right? Like it's a good, well-rounded, deep team. Like they've got players.
It really is stacked. And when the Liberty traded away Natasha Howard to the Dallas Wings in that Jonquel Jones trade, which I think was a 3-team trade with New York, Dallas, and Connecticut, but a player that flew under the radar to me was Kayla Thornton coming over to the Liberty in that deal. And she's been huge, not only with her defense, but she's had so many timely threes when everyone else can't get going. And there's Kayla standing in the corner, kind of in that Benaja role when Benaja's getting a break. And just great job by Jonathan Cobb. I don't want to get too far into our preview, but great job, Jonathan Cobb. So Sun coach Stephanie White, she won Coach of the Year in her first season. What do you think about that?
That's awesome. I am so excited that she had really good success there this year. And I think she definitely deserves it, right? Like you've got, not that Becky Hammond and Sandy Brondello's jobs are easy, but they kind of are, right? When you've got these all-star rosters and you have Stephanie White coming into still a pretty well-established team, but a lot of changes in the roster. You've got some veterans, you've got some newbies, and you've got this expectation to go to the finals because you've been going to the finals. And I mean, she was able to get to the playoffs. So I think that's awesome. Like that's great. That is really, really great. And I'm excited for her too, because she's moved around a little bit in her coaching. to have landed at the Sun. I think that's a really good move. So yeah, hopefully she can keep rising up.
Certainly. And when the Sun lost Brianna Jones to a torn Achilles early in this season, I thought that they were done. I didn't think that they would miss out on the playoffs, but I thought that they would squeak in at 7 or 8.
Right.
They were the number 3 seed. And as we talked about earlier, given those 2 super teams, it's damn near like they got the number 1 seed. And they did that without one of their best players.
Right. And with a brand new coach, and, like there's just so many things that they overcome. And a lot of that I think is due to Stephanie White and the team that she was able to build.
Most definitely. And you have a guy in Kurt Miller who was there in Connecticut for many years and led them to multiple finals, but they ultimately didn't get the job done. Here comes Stephanie White. She leads that team without a Brianna Jones, and shout out to Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner, the power couple, and even Beck Allen, who contributed a lot down the stretch for that team. But for the Sun to get the 3rd seed, I just thought was remarkable. And Kurt Miller dealt with different circumstances in LA where half the team was just injured the entire season. So I'm not trying to throw shade at him for not making the playoffs, but the facts are the facts that the Sun dealt with a terrible injury to one of their best players, still made the playoffs and got basically the top seed under those super teams, versus the Sparks where they didn't make the playoffs at all. So, it's a great coaching job by Stephanie White in her first season in Connecticut. So, most improved player. This one I thought was damn near going to be unanimous, but it wasn't. Still, the rightful winner took it, as Satou Sabally of the Dallas Wings is your most improved player.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I mean, I am surprised it wasn't unanimous. She had a great season. Just, so good. Such a strong finish to the season. Really, I think finding her foothold in the WNBA. So yeah, very, very excited for her as well. And a future star, right? We're going to see her up at the top here and in the awards, but also in her future teams, I think too.
Certainly. And she definitely took that jump that a lot of us were expecting for a couple of years, because her first 3 years in the league were she was there, she played well, but she had moments where she would just disappear. That didn't happen at all this season. And she emphatically was on the stat sheet, and not just on the stat sheet, but contributing down the stretch to wins. And just like the Sun getting the 3rd seed, the Wings got the 4th seed, and they did it with a first-year head coach in Trammell. And so shout out to Satou Sabally. Yeah. An addition, just like I thought that Kayla Thornton was a good addition to the Liberty in that 3-team trade, Natasha Howard was a great addition for the Wings, because she was able to pick up on the defensive end for Satou and let Satou focus more on her offensive game. Not to say that Satou was being hidden on defense, but when you're not having to guard the best stretch 4 on every team, that will help you conserve a lot of energy and have an impact on the offensive end. And I definitely thought that Satou was deserving of most improved.
I think everything was going for her, right? Yeah, like you said, good support pieces around her, really good coach, just really good season for her and for the Wings overall. But I think that has really, and then like I said, I hope she just keeps going up in these future seasons.
I definitely think that she will. And so the next award that I want to get to actually was unanimous, and that being Aaliyah Boston of the Indiana Fever.
I think if you had voted after one game, Shaun, it would have been unanimous.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you and I both picked her to be the Rookie of the Year, because it was kind of obvious who was going to come in and literally just take over the league. And so she was the 5th player to be voted unanimous MVP in WNBA history. The other 4 players, they're pretty good. Pretty good in their own right. So goes back. The first one was back in 2008, Candace Parker. 2010, Tina Charles won it with the Connecticut Sun. 2013, Elena Deladon won it with the Chicago Sky. And back in 2018, Asia Wilson won it with the Las Vegas Aces. So great company for Aaliyah Boston.
Very good company. I don't know how you would have given it to anybody else. Obviously, if Aaliyah was not in the league this season, there's lots of great rookies this season. But she came in, and like I said, from game 1, you were like, wow, she's been playing in the WNBA for years. Like she just is that seasoned, that awesome of a player. Yeah, she was really exciting to watch. And she basically just came in and kept doing what she was doing in college. So that's awesome to see, right? Because sometimes it takes a little bit to transition into the pro leagues and the competition that you're going up against, and new coach, new team, all that. But I mean, she just hit all of that in stride. So, and had herself a great season.
Yeah, that's what I was most impressed by, is just how smooth that transition was, how she basically looked like she was already playing in the pros coming from college. And in college, she was getting triple teamed and everything. And then even in the pros, they had a couple double teams coming at her, and she learned throughout the season how to pass out of it and take advantage of great players like a Kelsey Mitchell out on the wing and a Nalissa Smith. And so just great growth by the Fever too, because I mean, you were here with me in the first episode when I was damn near throwing some shade at the Atlanta Dream and the Indiana Fever, but they had both of them had fantastic seasons this year. The Fever didn't get into the playoffs, but still a huge stepping stone for them this year, and it was led by Aaliyah Boston.
Oh yeah, 100%. And credit to Dawn Staley. She's churning out WNBA ready players, and I'm looking forward to who the next person that comes out of South Carolina is, or wherever Dawn is going to keep coaching.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. And so the next award, this is another former Gamecock, and that is Asia Wilson won her second consecutive Defensive Player of the Year award back to back, as she joins Cheryl Swoops, Lisa Leslie, as the only players in history to win multiple Defensive Players of the Year and MVPs. And also on the defensive team, you had Stewie on the first team, but Najolani on the second. Why is that notable? It's because they are the first pair of teammates in Liberty franchise history to earn first and second all defensive team honors. And so just back to Asia more specifically, what did you think of the defensive season that she had this year to go back to back?
I mean, she's always awesome on defense. And again, credit to Dawn Staley. She produces very well-rounded basketball players. So she's, Asia is hustling her butt off on defense all the time, just as much as she's hustling to get that shot off. She is hustling and working so hard on the defensive end. And, she's such a strong defender, especially, she's tall, she's long, she gets in their faces. I think I'd rather, go up against Asia offensively than defensively, honestly. She is such a strong player on the defensive end. And, I kind of think people see the Defensive Player of the Year as like second to MVP. But I really think it's in kind of its own realm. You can't win without a good defense. And that speaks volume to the Aces. And is very, very key for the Aces. Like if you can't have 5 players that are playing defense well, then that's not good. And I again, the being able to be just dominant on both sides of the floor just really speak to her game, I think. And I think if she had anything to work on, coming out of college, it would have been defense. And again, she's a newer player. She's stacking up against these veterans. She's able to hold her own and be a real defensive threat.
So just now, as I was listening to what you had to say about that, I was looking also at the game logs from Asia Wilson this season. So 40 games in the regular season and 5 games in the postseason so far for the Aces, who have won every single game. So out of 45 games, just take a guess at how many games Asia went without a block in those 45 games. So I'm not asking how many she had a block in. How many did she not have a block in over 45 games this season?
1?
6. 6
I was going to say
games.
it's really low. It's got to be really, really low.
Yeah.
And I bet her minutes were low or something else was off in those games too.
Exactly. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, you look at the most recent game because she's had at least 1 block in each of the playoff games. Actually, she's had at least 2. She had 4 blocks in the first 3 games against Chicago, and then 1 against Dallas, and then the last 2 games against Dallas, she had 2 in each game. But yeah, it goes all the way back to September 2nd.
Man.
Actually, no, just kidding. She had one in that game. And so just taking a look at it, it actually goes back to August 17th against the New York Liberty. They did win that game 88-75, but she went without a block in that game.
Yeah.
And so point is that A'ja Wilson, if like I have a friend who's a degenerate gambler and he's constantly asking me for WNBA advice. And I always tell him, like, if A'ja Wilson's blocks are at like 2 or 2 or less, like 2.5 or less, I'm jumping all over that. Like, you could probably count on most of the time she's going to hit that. If it's at 1, like, that's free money basically, because she's going to consistently get blocks. And it's not just blocks for A'ja Wilson. Like, she is playing help defense. She's all around the floor, and she is truly one of, if not the best defender in the WNBA.
Yep. Plus, I think a block hypes her up more than her scoring, and that helps the whole team. So I think that's just really, another contribution to the Aces is when Asia's playing good defense, they're all like, yeah, we're in this, we're going for it.
Yeah, so now it's time to get to the most significant award. And this one was probably the only controversial one of all of the awards that we just mentioned. Because usually when you're going through regular season awards and we're having discussions like this, you might hear along the way, oh, I thought that this person should have won. No, the first 5, I think we could both agree that that was pretty accurate.
Yep.
This last one, everyone has different opinions on. And so Breanna Stewart, as I mentioned earlier, she won her second MVP, and she won it now with the New York Liberty. First player in Liberty franchise history to win the Most Valuable Player award. And it was in a race that was the closest MVP race among the top 3 in WNBA history. Stewie finishes 1. Alyssa Thomas of the Connecticut Sun finishes 2nd. And the reigning or former reigning MVP being A'ja Wilson, who improved in a lot of categories throughout this season and led the Aces to the most wins in franchise history. She finishes 3rd. So, Sam, was the deserving player selected as MVP?
I think so. I think Breanna Stewart had phenomenal season. Maybe one of her best yet. And I think she deserved to win it. The controversy, I think, to me more comes in, Alyssa Thomas also deserved to win MVP. She had a great season. She was carrying the Sun on her back. And so from like a one singular player that's making the difference on their team, like Alyssa Thomas, hands down. And then, A'ja Wilson also had another great season, as we just talked about, in her winning Defensive Player of the Year. I don't, you do that vote again, and it probably comes out with somebody else on top. Honestly, like all 3 of those players are so neck and neck, and each I think deserving in their own rights. But I think at the end, I think that Stewie had the slight edge on the MVP, and she won it. So I think it just speaks to who she is in the numbers that she puts up, in the way that she carries her team, and in the versatility that she has as a player.
I'm going to disagree, and this may come as a shocker considering the team that I support. Yeah. But on my last episode of WNBA Social, which was about midway through September, I was joined by my Hoop Social colleague Bobby Mullis, and we made predictions on who we think will win the awards. I actually said Alyssa Thomas because if I had a vote, and I'm trying to continue to break my way into the WNBA media space, but if I had a vote, I would have voted for Alyssa Thomas because in total, like not average, but in total rebounds and assists, she led the league. And not only that, but she had like 6-7 triple doubles this year. And she, as I mentioned earlier in the case for Stephanie White, she led her team to arguably, again, there's the asterisk on it, but arguably the top seed in the WNBA standings right behind those 2 super teams. And she did that after arguably the future of the Sun went down. Alyssa Thomas is still going to be around. DeWanna Bonner, this may be her last season. Hopefully she comes back for at least one more. But Brianna Jones was the player that they cored, meaning that is the player of their future and who they're going to look to now that they just traded a former MVP to your competitor.
Yep.
And so for Alyssa Thomas to put up all those numbers, but for the team to also win the way that they did, I personally would have voted for Alyssa Thomas because you think of the acronym MVP. To me, she was the most valuable player to her team in the league this season, but I understand why Stewie won.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. And that's my same thing. Like I honestly think the 1, 2, 3 was probably accurate in the way that it came out. But I hold true to that. If they did it again, somebody else would come out on top. Like that's just how close all three of those players are. But yeah, if you removed Alyssa Thomas from the Sun, right, they would not have had the season that they had. If you removed Brianna Stewart, if you removed A'ja Wilson from their teams, they probably still would have done really well. Right. So I agree with you on that aspect. Like the most valuable player to her team, Alyssa Thomas, hands down. But most valuable player in the whole league, that's where it gets, okay, who is that? Who's putting up those numbers?
Yeah, and so I would have voted for Alyssa Thomas personally if I had a vote, but the player who I actually expected to win was A'ja Wilson. I thought A'ja was going to go back to back, just like she did with Defensive Player of the Year, because as I mentioned earlier, she led the Aces to the most wins in franchise history, and I think it ranks pretty high as well at WNBA history in terms of overall wins. And she improved on basically all of her stats from last season when she was the MVP. And the thing that Becky Hammon said, she was very salty after the news came out. But understandably so. Like A'ja is her gal, and so the things that Becky said is she was just like, were these people only looking at box scores? Like, were they not looking at the game? Like, I should have played her in garbage time then so she could put up even bigger numbers. And I shouldn't have taken her out of so many games early when we were in control and we were leading by 20, 30 points. I should have just inflated her numbers because then maybe she actually would have won MVP because she was the MVP. And that's basically what Becky said.
Yeah, Dawn Staley was also pretty salty. I don't know if you saw any of her comments.
I didn't see that, but it would make sense.
She made a good comment about all three of them. But her little shade was like whoever voted for, because I think the reason that A'ja was third instead of second was there was like a fourth place vote that A'ja got. And so Dawn threw a little shade. But no, and Asia's awesome. But to that point, right, the Aces pretty much kept their team intact. They kept their coach intact. She
added Candace Parker
franchise. Yeah, exactly. They're the previous champions. Whereas Brianna Stewart is coming into a team that has never won a championship in the league. New coach, new team. Second year.
Oh yeah, new coach for her.
Liberty, right? Yeah, and new coach to Brianna Stewart, right? New team. She hasn't played with these people in the WNBA. And so I think that speaks more volumes. Not saying that A'ja didn't deserve it. I just think that if you look at like kind of that, and then like we were saying with Alyssa Thomas, I think it kind of evens itself out. But who knows? We'll see. We'll see if A'ja gets the last word here.
That really is an excellent point, though, because I think back to the Liberty earlier in the season, and I mentioned earlier on the podcast how about halfway through the season, it seemed like the Aces were in tier 1, and then there was a gap. And then you had the Liberty tier 2, another gap. Okay. And then you have like the Sun and the Wings and whoever else. But the Liberty definitely got it together, and they worked through those chemistry issues, and like they were really clicking. And to me, it really started with Jonquel Jones finally finding her role, getting healthy again, getting her conditioning back with her. But it's a great point because the Liberty did everything that they did, including beat the Aces in the Commissioner's Cup, and also if you include that Commissioner's Cup game, the Liberty won the season series 3-2, and so they did all of that as a new team. It's a great point, Sam. And the thing I feel about this MVP award is it was the closest race for a reason, and I may be arguing against Stewie winning it, but that's kind of me playing devil's advocate and just honestly just sharing how I felt going into it and the way that I thought it would end. But at the end of the day, regardless of who won between these three candidates, it's not really wrong.
Right.
You could have your preference, but all three, in my opinion, were deserving of winning the MVP.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely.
All right, it's time for our 2023 WNBA Finals preview. I hit the nail on the head, ladies and gentlemen, as I predicted, so boldly at the beginning of the season that we would see the two super teams in the finals, just like everyone else. Probably like 80% of people who made predictions made the same exact one. So great job by me. But anyways, we are finally getting that matchup that we all anticipated between the Liberty and the Aces. But I haven't had an episode since previewing the playoffs, as Bobby and I, we did our playoff preview the day that the playoffs started. And so let's just catch up on what happened in the first couple rounds. So the Aces, they took care of business as the number 1 seed against the Chicago Sky. They swept them 2-0. And A'ja Wilson, she had her third 30-point, at least 30-point, 10-rebound playoff game, which is the most in WNBA history. And she had 38 points in the second game of that series, which broke Becky Hammond's franchise record. And it was kind of an entertaining reaction. Sam, I'm not sure if you saw it, but when they told A'ja the news after the game, she was like, "Oh, who'd I beat? Oh, I beat Becky. Oh, yeah." And she like just kind of rubbing it in. And I thought that it was great. And it's the 5th straight semifinals for the Aces, which is an accomplishment in itself. And Liberty, they swept the Mystics 2-0. It seemed like a lot closer series than what the final tally indicated. And the second game, it went to overtime, and Jonquel Jones, she got a clutch offensive rebound at the end of regulation in that game off of 2 missed free throws from Sabrina Ionescu. You almost never, ever see that. We saw it late in a key game, but JJ, as she has done all season long, getting a clutch offensive board, and it was the first overtime playoff game for both teams since they met in the 2015 WNBA playoffs. I just want to give a shout out to Natasha Cloud because she had a playoff career high in points in that game. But the Liberty ultimately won, and they made their first trip to the semifinals since 2015. The Sun, they beat the Lynx in 3 games, 2-1. And the Lynx, the one game that they did win was because they scored over 80 points. And it was actually the Lynx's first playoff win in game 2 since winning the title back in 2017, which is something I didn't think was a thing, but it makes sense. They've made the playoffs, but they hadn't won since they won the title with Maya Moore back in 2017. So that was a crazy stat, and good for the Lynx getting into the playoffs and also getting a win. And then in the 4-5 matchup in the first round, the Wings, they swept the Dream 2-0 as it was Dallas's first playoff series win since the 2009 East Finals, when they were, Tulsa at that point?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's crazy in itself. And then moving on to the semifinals, Sam, even though your matchup of Sun and Wings didn't happen in the WNBA Finals, they did both get to the semifinals, which I do consider to be significant. However, the Aces, they took care of business again as they swept the Wings 3-0. The Liberty, they beat the Sun 3-1 as the Sun took game 1 in Brooklyn against the Liberty, and then Liberty took it on the chin and they won the next 3. And both teams, the thing that was interesting about that series is that both teams are 0-4 all time in the WNBA Finals. The Connecticut's last appearance was in 2022, last year, obviously, but New York's was in 2002. So we can scratch that off the list. The New York Liberty are back in the WNBA Finals for the first time since 2002. Battle of the super teams. And so just what are your early impressions on what we're going to see starting on Sunday?
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. It's gonna be so exciting. There's just so much to see, and there's gonna be so much happening, I think, in every single game. It's gonna be tough. I don't know how quickly one team or the other is gonna, come out and just blow the other team away. I think this is very reminiscent of the 2016 and 2017 matchups with the Sparks and the Lynx, and you had these really awesome teams. I really hope the series goes to 5 games, honestly, because that's exciting. Maybe if not, if you're a really strong Liberty fan or a really strong Aces fan, but from an overall perspective, it's, more basketball games for us to watch. But also I think it just makes, that much more of a dramatic finish for the season. And honestly, I think that would be the best way that this goes out, right? Whoever gets the last word is going to win it. So I hope it goes 5 games. But it's just gonna be a whirlwind, Shaun. I don't even know. There's just gonna be so much happening.
I am so excited, and to just check the scores from this past season when these two teams did play in the regular season. The first matchup at the end of June, I will never forget that game because I was up in Lake Tahoe with my family and I tuned in for it, and I just knew right away. I was just like, oh, they are not the same. They are not the same at all. As the Aces went on to win that game in Vegas 98-81. And then they didn't play again for another month. But when they did on August 6th in Brooklyn, the New York Liberty made a statement as they won by 38 points. They were up by 40 throughout the fourth quarter. They ultimately win by 38 as the Liberty won 99-61. Then you fast forward to 9 days later, the Commissioner's Cup game. And for those of you who are unaware, the Commissioner's Cup is basically the WNBA's in-season tournament. And all the Commissioner's Cup games are played during the regular season. You play teams within your conference. And the Liberty and Aces ultimately met in that game. And the Liberty won 82-63. And they hoisted a trophy on the Aces home court in 2023, which could be foreshadowing for what we may see later on. However, 2 days later, the Aces got their get back in a regular season game as they won 88-75. Then you go to the end of the month on August 28th in New York as the Liberty pulled away in that one 94-85, and they haven't met since. So, as I said to you, if you count the Commissioner's Cup game, the Liberty won the season series 3-2. But if we just keep it strictly regular season games, it was 2-2. And
2-2.
So,
you need that fifth game to break the tie. That's what I'm saying, man. It's going to be a repeat. It's going to be 2-2 games. We're going to go into the fifth game unsure of who's coming out on top.
I certainly think it's going 5. I definitely think it's going 5. And I made my prediction to one of my friends when the Liberty clinched last Sunday. And I said, I won't reveal my pick just yet, but I said, blank in 5. And he was like, oh, you think they're going to end it in 5? And it's because he's like so accustomed to the NBA that he was thinking that it would be like a 4-1. And I was like, well, in the WNBA, it's best of 5. So It's really like I'm saying it's going to game 7. And he was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. But I've been told that the New York Liberty have no chance in this series. I actually made a wager. I picked the Liberty in 5. Look at that. I built up the suspense for a good 30 seconds before I made my pick.
I mean, I could guess that, Shaun, but you know.
Obviously, you know, I mean, those who know, they know. But anyways, I picked the Liberty in 5, and I was told that the Liberty have no shot at all. I made a $20 bet with one of my friends on the series, and I was told that I'm donating my money and that there is not a chance in hell. And shout out to Evan in one of my fantasy football group chats for being the one that I'm speaking about right now, because he just said I have no chance and the Liberty have no chance. And so do you agree with that? I mean, you were saying that you think it'll go 5, so it seems like you believe it'll be a much more competitive series, just like I do.
Yeah, I think it's a really competitive series. Right, they've battled it out all season. This has been the hype, and they're both teams that like to deliver when there is a lot of hype around them. And this is it, right? This is the finals for the Liberty. There is a lot on the line, right? Can this super team that was assembled do the unthinkable? And you know, this time last year, no way would anybody have thought the Liberty were going to the final. You know, can they win this? Not just for this season, but for the Liberty as a franchise. That's a lot. And, you know, all those players, though, like, they are ready for it. And then the same thing on the Aces, right? They want to go back to back. They want to go back to back for the first time since the 2001, 2002 seasons. It's certainly possible for them too. They have the talent. They have, this championship mindset, and they did it last year. They've been here before. So in some ways, it's just like regular business for them. I think I give the edge to Liberty as well. That's my pick. They have a stronger bench, I think, and they've got more tested experience over the playoffs. So that's my edge. But like I said, they both have the capability to come in and win this.
Certainly. And you mentioned the stat about the Sparks being the last team to repeat. Like, it's been over 20 years because it's so hard to do. And we have seen reigning champions make it back to the finals. You mentioned that Sparks and Lynx series that there was a reigning champion, I think, multiple times in that battle throughout the years that made it back to the finals and then lost. And so we shall see if the Aces are able to get over that hump and finish the job. So to me, I have two key players in this series for the New York Liberty, and then I'll even give it a key player for the Aces. For the Liberty, I got one as a starter and the second coming off the bench. I mentioned the starter earlier, that being Betnijah Laney. If you look at all the graphics that are posted of the New York Liberty everywhere, you never see Betnijah Laney. You see ESPN post, oh, the Liberty are headed back to the WNBA Finals. What do you see? You see that same 3-player super team pick of Brianna, Jonquel, and Sabrina.
Yep. Sometimes Courtney. I've seen her a couple times, but not like Betnijah's like never in there.
Exactly. And so thank you for helping my point there, because even Courtney will sneak in there. And that's not throwing shade at Courtney, because like I said, she's a future Hall of Famer. But if you truly watch Liberty games and you're tuned in for the entire game, you would notice that Betnijah Laney is truly the key player to them winning this series against the Aces. Because if you look at the Liberty's 6 playoff games so far, am I counting that right? Yeah, 6.
Yeah.
6 playoff games, they've won 5 of them. You look at the one game that they lost, Betnijah Laney had 3 points. In all other 5 games, she scored 19 or more. She had 19 in both wins against the Mystics. She had 20 in the first 2 wins against the Sun and 21 in the clincher. So if Betnijah Laney scores at least 19 points for the Liberty, they're damn near a lock to win. And I've heard the argument that, Stewie hasn't shot very well throughout these playoffs. She had a great game 4 that clinched their trip to the finals. But before then, she's been pretty streaky and for the most part, ice cold shooting. And some people have told me you can't afford a game like that from Stewie against the Aces. I agree. But if you get a contribution from a Betnijah Laney like they have been, they can't afford it. And I'll briefly say, the player that I'm looking to on the Liberty might surprise some people, actually, because you look at their bench. There's a Marie Johannes out there having highlight plays every time she touches the basketball. I mentioned Kayla Thornton earlier and how she's made a big impact since coming over from Dallas in the offseason. But given this series, the player that I'm looking to off the bench for the Liberty the most is Big Mama, Stephanie Dolson. Stephanie Dolson, because you think about it, not only if Jonquel Jones or Brianna Stewart get into foul trouble, I mean, I'm going to knock on this wood desk, but if they get into foul trouble against A'ja Wilson, because A'ja Wilson is a freaking powerhouse and she will get to the bucket no matter who's in front of her. If they get into foul trouble, whether if it be legitimate fouls or ticky-tack fouls, then the Liberty are going to need a body off the bench. And they're going to need a big body coming off the bench. Hanju, she's been in and out of the team this year. She had overseas commitments, and she's come back, but I haven't seen much of her since this season.
Yeah.
Stephanie Dolson, who took a step back when Jonquel and Brianna were brought to the team, because Dolson used to be the starting center, but she took a step back. She got through her ankle injury that she suffered early in the season, and she's been playing well as of late. And going up not only against A'ja Wilson, but also former New York Liberty player Kia Stokes, I really am looking at Stephanie Dolson to be a key player off the bench for the Liberty in this series.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, she has had, like you said, she was a starter, and here she is coming off the bench, but she was a starter, so she has that talent to be able to come in and not replace Jonquel and Brianna, but definitely give the Liberty a very strong performance in a way that the Aces don't have. If they have the reverse of what you just said happen, the Aces don't have anybody to fill those spots, or maybe they have one person, right, and then that's it. That's their bench. So I think it's key to get Dolson. I think she should get some minutes, hopefully, in one of the first 2 games, so that way she gets some confidence, so that when they do get to the end, they can count on her, right? And I just think that that's going to be really, really key. Her coming off the bench, even just for rest, right? Because it's a 5-game series. It's long, and if our prediction is correct and we're going all the way to 5, it's a lot of basketball.
It certainly is. And on the Aces side of things, number one, what's the status of Candace Parker? That's what I'm wondering, because not only is she a great starter, but she could give some relief and mix up the rotations for Becky Hammon. And obviously she has all that intelligence that she'll bring to the court and experience. And so I'm wondering what's going on with Candace's foot, and does she even have a chance to play in this series? But when it comes to a key player from the Aces, obviously you have Asia Wilson, who is going to light the world on fire. Kelsey Plum's out there on the wing and getting to the cup. Even Chelsea Gray tossing dimes left and right. And Chelsea Gray, let's not forget, was the Finals MVP last year.
She's my key player for the Aces, I think. Chelsea Gray loves playoff basketball. This is when she shines, for sure. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, Finals MVP last year. If you watched her on the Sparks, that's when she like really took off as a point guard. And like, my goodness, like that is her element.
I agree. And she's almost for our casual listeners who don't pay attention to the WNBA close enough, but you're a basketball fan, she's channeling her Jimmy Butler. How Jimmy Butler, not to say that Chelsea doesn't give a fuck about the regular season, because Jimmy certainly does not, but she flips the switch when the playoffs happen, and she just becomes a different player. And she is the point god throughout the regular season, God spelled Gawd. But yeah, like I said, and like you said, she just flips the switch when it comes into the postseason. But for me, I mentioned all those great players. Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on Kia Stokes, because if she can have an impact in this series, then that could go a long way. But I am actually looking at the silent assassin, Jackie Young.
Yeah.
Jackie Young is the key player to me, because much like Banaj Eleni, you see her out on the wing a lot. And if she gets going, I think in one of those Liberty Aces games from this season, she just went on a heater. And I think that was in that very first game back in June. And so if Jackie Young can get going, then, I mean, you're already going to have Asia and Chelsea going, probably featuring Kelsey as well. And so if you got all 4 of them going at the same time, even without a Candace Parker, the Aces, no one could beat them. And we'll see if that does happen, because it's all about consistency. But yeah, so you and I are both leaning Liberty in 5, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely am leaning that way. I think, that's why I said the strong bench, as we just ran through all those players, right? Everybody that we talked about besides Kia Stokes for the Aces, those are all starters. And Candace Parker, the question mark, I don't know if we'll see her. But I think the Liberty just have the depth to go into this 5-game series strong, and they were tested more in these playoffs. I mean, for a lot of reasons, the Aces rolled through these playoffs. It was kind of just predestined. They just went to work and got it done, and they also were number 1 overall, and so they got those maybe slightly easier matchups. But, I think there's something to be said, right? Like, Liberty didn't put up a clean sheet in the playoffs, but they're coming in, I think, a little bit more ready and a little bit more, I don't know, hungry, or I don't know what the right word is.
Battle tested.
Yeah, they're just ready for it. And I think that there's just maybe a lot more to play for all of them too individually. Not that the Aces are not trying to play for another championship. They 100% are. But just, I think it's like an individual and a team quest for all of the Liberty players in a way that the Aces, right, are more, defending champions. They're trying to do it again. So I think the edge goes to the Liberty. Now, my question is, because I don't remember how they do this, they alternate locations, or they go 2 and then 2, and then the 5th game is back at the number 1 seed?
2-2-1.
2-2-1. Okay. So yeah, so that game 5, like you just said about the Commissioner's Cup happening on the Aces home court, that fifth game would be back in Las Vegas. And that would mean, the Liberty winning on the road, which they certainly can do, as they've done before this season. So I think that'd be the cherry on top for their season.
Who's Finals MVP then?
Ooh, I don't think you give it to Stewie. Even if she has a great final series, I think that there's some other standout players. I think, if Sabrina shows up and has a good series, she could definitely get MVP. I think Benaja could get MVP, based on what she's putting in. I would probably lean towards one of those two. I don't know if they typically do they typically give the MVP to the opposite team?
No,
it's typically to the winning team, right? Unless there's just like some standout thing.
Basically, I would imagine it was like to have another casual comparable to the MNBA, like LeBron in 2015 when the Warriors beat the Cavs and Andre Iguodala did get Finals MVP, but LeBron got a lot of votes just because he was going nuts.
Yeah. It'd have to be something like that, which I mean could happen too in this series. But I would lean towards maybe not Stewie, maybe Jonquel. I think somebody else is going to step up in a really significant way for the Liberty.
I'm not letting you do that. I need an official pick. I heard maybe, could be, I don't know, not her. Gosh. The only thing that I heard that was definitive.
Choices, Shaun.
The only thing that I heard that was definitive is not Stewie.
Not
okay,
Stewie.
We've ruled out the regular season MVP.
Okay, I'll pick Sabrina. I'll pick Sabrina Ionescu, Finals MVP. Yeah.
From 3-point champion to Finals MVP.
Yeah.
Could be a phenomenal finish to the season for Sabrina Ionescu. I am going to make a definitive pick, and I'm going with Benaja Laney. I know that you mentioned her as a potential for you, but just like I said earlier, if she is consistent, like you could say 20 a game, but the stats say, 19 a game. But basically, if you're going to get 20 a game from Benaja Laney and she's consistent like she has been throughout these playoffs, and she continues to be that fourth option for the Liberty, then to me, like she has to be the MVP. Or let me think about it. Fourth option? Not fifth option. I was thinking about her between her and Courtney, but even fifth option. And so for her to be the fifth option on this team, I feel like is just what opens the door for her. And the Liberty have gotten their chemistry down to where they can swing the ball around with ease. And that's what leads to B getting so many open shots. And so to me, if the Liberty do win this series, it's because Benaja Laney continues to be consistent as she has throughout these playoffs. And optimistically, I'd like to say that she gets the shine that she so rightfully deserves. I mean, at least she was on the Slam cover. But, to me, if the Liberty do actually win this series, Benaja Laney has to be the Finals MVP. But, again, just like I said earlier with what I thought was going to be for Finals MVP, I would have voted for Alyssa Thomas, but I thought Asia would win. In this scenario, if the Liberty hypothetically were to win, I would vote for Benaja Laney if I was a member of the media, assuming that she has a consistent series like I just described. But, I mean, Sabrina or Stewie or Jonquel, they seem like they would be more likely. But who knows? I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Do you have any final thoughts on the WNBA Finals or anything that we talked about today? Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me again. No, I mean, I'm just so excited that we're at the finals and that these are the two teams in it. It just makes it so much more exciting to watch, and just so awesome to have had this really, really great season. I think not just for the Liberty and the Aces, but the overall WNBA season was phenomenal. Great moving to 40 games. Hope we get that same amount next year. Hope we get some longer. I loved that all the playoff games are series. Hope we extend those series. Let's do a seven series here for the final. Let's make that even longer. Let's draw this out. And I think it's going to be a really, really good final series here. And I'm so excited to watch.
Give the WNBA a chance. Now's the time. It's on ESPN. If you got cable, you likely have ESPN. I don't know if they'll be simulcasted on ABC 10 as well. Or
it looks
ABC.
like they're actually going to be on ABC, Shaun. At least that's what ESPN's app is saying.
Let's go.
It looks like game 1 is
even
ABC.
Better.
Game 2 is ESPN.
Okay.
Game 3 would be ABC. And then if necessary, it looks like the last 2 would be ESPN. So game 1 and game 3 are ABC, and the rest are shown as ESPN. So yeah, like, come on, watch the WNBA Finals.
Thank you for confirming that. And you know what I just heard? I just heard no excuses not to watch the WNBA Finals and give them a chance. I don't give a damn if those 2 ABC games are on a Sunday, the same day as football, because you can have Red Zone on one device. We all got several devices now. Red Zone on one device, put the WNBA on the TV and give it a chance.
Mm-hmm.
At least if you watch it and you say it's not for you, I'll accept that. But I just can't accept people saying, oh, I watched it 10 years ago. I'm good. Like, get the fuck out of here. Give the WNBA a chance. Anyways, that's a good way to end the podcast. So, that's going to do it for episode number 5 of all Hoop Social podcasts go live. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Shaun_Holko. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on all podcast platforms. And if you're enjoying the show, give us 5 stars, as we'd really appreciate it. As you've been tuned into episode number 5 of WNBA Social. For Sam Poeppelman, I'm Shaun Holko. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you after the finals. I'll be there for game 1. Later.